Hi, it's episode 6 here on Off Court with Greg. It's myself, Greg Rusedski, Kevin Palmer from Tennis 365, and Ashley Neaves, the tennis mentor. Can't believe we made episode 6 already. We're going to review what happened in the Australian Open, the big talking points. Today's topics are going to be Carlos Alcaraz, seventh major already, ahead of Becker, ahead of Edberg, tied with McEnroe. Does Alcaraz need a super coach? What's next for Novak? Does he play Roland Garros? Does he decide to skip it to focus on Wimbledon, where everybody thinks that's the one he could possibly win? Zverev is back. Craig Tiley, the tournament director of the Australian Open, is suggesting 5 sets for the ladies from the quarters onwards. Sabalenka, again, getting to another final. Does she get tight? Does she need someone extra to the team to push her through that? Because she should have probably by now, over the last year, won at least 2 to 4 majors instead of just one. And then finally, we got to talk about Emma Raducanu because she's already had 10 coaches in a short period of time. So, Kevin, why don't you kick us off with Alcaraz and his 7 majors?
Do you know what, Greg? I don't know how we can put into perspective how amazing this is from this young man. He was just so amazing yesterday in his press conference. Again, his smile, his joy, everything around Carlos Alcaraz is impossible not to love. And I just think as a sport, we're so lucky to have a guy who's bringing not just profile to the sport and the way he plays, but the way he sort of expresses himself and the joy that we're all getting from him. How can you not like Carlos Alcaraz? If you don't like Carlos Alcaraz, you don't like sport in a way. And I just think there's so much around yesterday's match or Sunday's match that was just so incredible. I mean, it's going to be historic. The images at the end of him holding that Australian Open trophy for the first time. Novak's grace in the way that he kind of dealt with the situation. He must have been disappointed, but I'm sure there's a little bit of Novak thinking, this hasn't been a bad 2 weeks for me after all, and I'm back in the game. But from Carlos Alcaraz's perspective, he's ahead of Becker and Edberg. I mean, we our generation, Greg, think Becker and Edberg are absolute legends. Your all-time favourite, John McEnroe, he's now level with McEnroe, and we definitely see John McEnroe as a legend. He's one behind Andre Agassi. I mean, we said in the Off-Court Cut show yesterday how many titles is Alcaraz going to win? You predicted he could get in excess of 20. I think he's well on the way to do that. He could have 8 or 9 by the end of this year. So I mean, it's hard to put into words what this young man is achieving. And I know my daughter loves him, and I know my wife loves him, and I know my dad loves him, and he crosses over that borderline of everybody who kind of watches sport. He's just got that X factor, and all hail Carlos Alcaraz. What a hero. What are your thoughts, Ashley?
Yeah, I mean, tennis is in safe hands. We were worried after Roger Rafa and Novak, what tennis would look like. And, shortly after, we've got Alcaraz and Sinner. And these guys, hopefully are going to be here for the long run. Greg mentioned that, he's thinking about maybe Alcaraz can get 20, and he's not wrong. He's going to get at least 2 a year as long as he stays in the sport at the moment because, behind him and Sinner, there aren't many. We did see Zverev pushing him, and he had his chances. We've got some younger up-and-coming players like Tien who pushed Zverev as well. Djokovic is still there. So there are players that can stop them, but I just think over the period of the next few years, we're going to still see a lot of slams won by these two. But it's always very difficult to compare the players of today to the players of yesterday. And I almost don't think it's fair to compare the amount of slams won by these players versus the McEnroes and the Beckers and that sort of thing. But there's one interesting thing. I had a chat with a friend of mine, Rashi, the founder of Touch Tennis, and he was talking about the big change that was made in the early 2000s. I think it was 2001 when they changed the amount of seeds in the slams from 16 to 32. And I do, having a chat with him about it, I do think it plays a big favor to these top players because they're able to dodge the other seeded players. Back in the days before the 2000s, with only 16 seeds, you could get, a dark horse in an early round, and that could change the way that these players dominate the sport. So it was definitely more difficult to have these top 2 players dominating as we see them today. What do you think about that, Greg?
Well, I actually lived through that period. I remember one year going into Wimbledon, I was 17. Philippoussis was 7 in the world. We played in the opening round. I mean, that's a gangbuster first round at Wimbledon. One of us is going home. That wouldn't happen. That would be basically in the 3rd round at the earliest, that matchup, the 7th and the 17th player in the world hitting each other. So it has made it easier for the big names. The tournaments like it because it protects the top men's and women's tennis players. But where Carlos and obviously Yannick are at the moment, they've separated themselves from the pack. So even if we had that, I don't think it would make such a difference, but it has changed the game. And also in 2000, the courts became very similar. The grass became slower, the balls became heavier. Everything is medium slow now. During my generation, going back in the last century, that's how old I am. We had fast courts, we had slow courts. Every week was different. Every ball was different. There wasn't the consistency. So I think that makes it also easier to dominate. If we remember the blue clay with Roger Federer, he adjusted the best than anybody when it was slippery and sliding because he had played through that generation of different surfaces. But, going back to Alcaraz, boy, what a breath of fresh air. My wife watched the match with me as well. She's looking, God, he's a great looking guy. Good biceps there. The old Rafa shirt. Rafa was in the crowd. So people loved him just because of his personality. He's got an unbelievable look. He's a good family guy as well, still living at home. But I also want to get into the part with him. Does he need a super coach? And from what I saw throughout these championships, Sammy Lopez has done a great job. He's technically changed his serve with the motion. He's improved the toss. And the relationship on the sideline looks good. He's a little bit calmer from the background. So, from my opinion, don't change a winning formula. He's just become the youngest male tennis player in history at 22 years of age to hold all four majors, first Australian Open title. Don't bring anybody new. Keep the roll going. That's my view. What's your view, Kevin?
Do you know, I think Carlos Alcaraz somewhere in Spain would have been sat on that Sunday morning as it was in Spanish time thinking, how did this happen to me? Because he's built that team. That's his team there. All the same voices are there. All the same faces are there. And suddenly he's not there. And he must have felt very, very strange watching that yesterday. He actually said it was very odd watching my team with Carlos and I'm not there. And he's spoken about what it's going to be like when they first meet up now. So, that we spoke about this on our show when it happened. And we all thought maybe they were going to get back together at some point, but it feels like the split is real in a way. And I thought it was kind of interesting that he paid a special tribute to his dad after the semi-final, because there's a lot of talk that his dad was quite heavily involved in the decision to part ways with Juan Carlos Ferrero, and that maybe the idea that Ferrero was the father figure might not have gone down too well with Carlos's dad. I don't know, but that might have been a factor. Another issue, I don't know whether you might want to comment on this, Greg, is Ferrero has got his academy, and Carlos Alcaraz has now got his own academy, which his dad is running. I mean, there's almost like a business element to it there, that they want Carlos his academy to be the star of the show in Spain, and maybe that was a bit of a clash. I don't know, but it doesn't look like they're going to get back together. And as you say, they don't need to get back together, do they?
Well, the other thing, adding to that as well, is Juan Carlos was actually on the DP World Golf Tour coaching a young Spanish player for the mental side of it in golf. And most tennis players love golf, so he's trying something different. But, if I'm one of those people in the top 10 and I see Juan Carlos Ferrero available, I am adding him onto my team. I'm saying, what do you want? I need to find a way to beat Sinner Alcaraz. Come join my team. So if I'm from 3 to 10 in the world, I would be on the phone right now saying, okay, I need to know how to beat Carlos and Yannick because you have done it. So that's what I would say. And I think he's moved on. He's stepped forward. This is his new team. We're not going to talk about it anymore. He's not going to add a super coach. That's my view. What's your view on it, Ashley?
To be honest, I'm not going to add much more. I think you're right. I think he's settled in with his team very well. He looks super comfortable, and I think we've got to give a lot more credit to Sammy Lopez. He is a phenomenal coach. He's done a great job with Carlos, throughout the last few years, and so just continuing that relationship, I think it's a winning formula. I think sometimes you can jump to adding a superstar coach into your team and it not work out. We've seen it happen with other players, and so I think he's just got to be calm. He's got to be settled, and that's where he is right now, and it's a winning formula.
Yeah, and also we've got to talk about Novak Djokovic. I mean, what a story down under, beating Sinner, finding a way to get to another Australian Open final. Yes, he lost his first ever Australian Open final, but it's given all those Djokovic fans hope again. His speech was brilliant, a little bit of comedy there, saying also to his team, I know you've had the struggles, the ups and downs with me. He's a great statesman. Also giving credit to Rafa there, who's sitting in the front row, talking about how bizarre it is. But now comes a point where it becomes very strategic, because last year he didn't play very much. And I honestly don't think he can win in Paris because of the physical demands. Does he take the time off, not playing maybe the French Open, and really focusing on trying to win Wimbledon? Because that's the one we all believe he can still win. And especially from what he did down under in Australia, hard courts and grass have always been his best surface. So, Ashley, what's your thought on that sort of idea and what's next for Novak?
I don't think it's a crazy idea. I think it's a good idea, to be honest. I think the key is if he did take, the French Open off and avoided the clay court season altogether, he'd have more opportunities to hit on those faster surfaces and kind of groove his game ready for Wimbledon. However, is he going to get the right level of match practice in the meantime? And, we actually saw he might not need the match practice. He nearly had 2 matches off getting into reaching the semis and the finals of this slam. His body needs the break. So, I don't think it's a bad idea. I think he should possibly put all of his eggs in one basket. For him to do well at the French, it's not just Yannick and Alcaraz, but actually you've got other players that do well there. You've got Zverev, who is phenomenal on the clay. You've got players like Casper Ruud, who's reached the finals a couple of times as well. So it's not going to be, a very easy slam for him to go really deep into the draw-in. So, yeah, maybe get more fast court, fast-paced surface practice.
For me, the only issue there, guys, is he's got how long? I mean, in middle of May, the French Open starts. He has to play some tournaments. I'm sure he'll play Indian Wells and Miami. If he did pull out of let's say he didn't play Paris, would there be any point in him playing Monte Carlo? Would there be any point in him playing in Madrid? I don't know. I mean, it kind of feels like he can't take 3 months off and then just rock up at Wimbledon and hope to win. So I think there's a balance between not playing and then finding a way to, maybe play a grass court warm-up event. That could be the solution. He could play at Queen's, he could play in Halle. There could be something like that as a counter out. But Greg, he can't really just have. He can't not play until now in May and just save his body, can he? He has to have some tennis in there at some point.
He's definitely going to play Indian Wells in Miami. That's what I think he's going to do. And you can play Rome and Madrid and take the French Open off because he can do whatever he wants to do, but it also depends on sponsorship commitments, how many matches he needs. And if he takes that sort of clay court period off, you're right, he'd have to play a lead-up tournament, which he never does. So usually he plays in Paris. There's 3 weeks in between now. It used to be 2 weeks in the old days. So, he could actually play 2 lead-up tournaments, week off, and then play Wimbledon. So it's going to be interesting to see what he decides to do with his team. And, at 38 years young, going to be 39 in May, you think to yourself, you've got to save the body for the right things and for the slams you believe you can win. So I'm going to be interested to watch this pace to see how many events and what he does going into Wimbledon, because after these 2 weeks, everybody puts him up there with a chance to win Wimbledon. Anybody who doesn't, I don't think you've just watched the last 2 weeks of tennis, because he's made improvements on the forehand. The serve is getting better. The strategy, the volleys look better. Everything is improving, and he's going to keep on improving because he is desperate to get number 25, and he's been so close to doing it. And he's beaten Sinner now. He's beaten Alcaraz last year at the Australian Open. This year he's beaten Sinner, but he hasn't been able to do it back-to-back. So he'll need a little bit of luck in the equation as well. But one guy I want to talk about is the man who served for the match against Carlos Alcaraz in the 5th set, 5-4, got tentative when he tried to close the deal out, wasn't willing to be brave enough, but he's on the cusp. And, Zverev looks like he's back. But do you guys think, coming into Roland Garros, does he have a shot? Because that's the slam he always plays the best at. What's your opinion on that, Ashley?
I think he has a great shot. I think he gets a lot of stick for not being aggressive enough in his game. And I think he certainly showed that he can be in that match that he played, albeit when it got to those tight situations, especially when he was serving for it around 30-15 and 30-all, there was just a couple of tame mid-court balls that, just got punished. So he has the game to do well. The French is probably his best shot at winning a slam. You saw what he did that year when he faced Rafa and had that horrible ankle injury. He's come back from that really strong. He's one of the fittest players on tour as well. When you look at him compared to Sinner and Alcaraz, these two players are athletes, but they were both struggling with cramp and other issues during the Aussie Open, whereas Zverev wasn't. And so, when it comes to the French Open, it is a more physical sport. It will be really interesting to see if he can take that aggression to the clay courts and do some damage. What do you think, Kevin?
I think that the key for me for Zverev at this Australian Open was that the body language was better. The smile was kind of back on his face. He did some really nice post-match interviews involving his brother, and it kind of felt like the joy was back a bit. I looked at Zverev at the back end of last year, and it looked really hard work. It looked painful at times. He knew he wasn't going to beat Alcaraz and Sinner, and when he was playing them, he was a million miles off them. He was number 3 in the world, but it felt like he could have been way down the rankings. Whereas I think this week it looked different. Certainly against Alcaraz, he sustained that level for a long time. He did slightly come off at the end, but I would sort of say that the legs had gone. He said in his press conference he just couldn't get up to hit the serve in the previous game. And he just said he just didn't have the energy, and he didn't have that. And after a 5-hour tennis match, that can happen. So he will come away from that not thinking this is another occasion when I choked and another occasion when I should have won. I think he's going to think of it as a positive step forward from where he was for the last 6 months of last year to where he is now. He's heading into he's heading to the Miami Indian Wells phase to start with, but in terms of the clay court season, which is where he excels, I think he's definitely one of the big contenders, and he'll fancy his chances of getting over the line against possibly not both of them. He'll have to hope one of them trips up along the way, but Sinner or Alcaraz, he'll think he can beat them again now, which is massive, Greg, psychologically, to have that in your mind that you can win, which I don't think he had the back end of last year.
Well, and also, if we look at the match with Carlos again at the Australian Open, he served for that second set at 5-3. These are the moments where I think he's got to get braver and bolder and practice those things. Get on the practice court with your coach. Okay, 5-3. Let's serve this out. Let's find solutions and get that mental training so he can break that barrier, because the tennis is there. And physically, he says it's the best I've felt since that French Open injury against Rafael Nadal, where he was playing gangbusters tennis, the best tennis I've ever seen him play. So that's a positive. Great to have him in the mix. Great to have Djokovic in the mix again, as well as a real threat. So for me, lots of positives for Zverev. Let's see how he pushes forward for the next few months going into the next major. The other topic I want to talk about, Craig Tiley's said at the Australian Open, this is the tournament director who's been rumored to possibly become the new head of the USTA and the US Open. He said 5 sets for the women from the quarterfinals onwards. I'm not so sure about this. I quite like the traditional format of 2 out of 3 sets. I think it's a little bit bold. You've got to try new things sometimes, but I still am a little bit of a traditionalist where I think let's keep it at 2 out of 3 sets. What are your views on that idea, Ashley?
It's a really interesting one. I heard the talks about this last year and the year before, actually, and it's almost to the extent where it probably won't ever happen because, we just keep talking about it. But I think there'd be a lot of the WTA players that would like the challenge of playing 5-set matches. We've spoken before about the dynamic being so different, and, you can really feel your way into a match, and even if you have one bad set, there's still an opportunity to find your way back. So it could change the dynamic of which players are getting through to the finals of the slams, because there's a lot more physicality that comes into it and a lot more mental skills. And for those players that really go big on their shots, it's more difficult to do that over a longer period of time. I think if they were to do it, I don't think it should be just from the quarters onwards. I think it should be for the whole event. I think that would be odd to change a ruling midway through the tournament. I'm not against it. I'm all for equality in tennis, and I think that lots of the women would. There's been an argument in the past that the men should get paid more because they play more sets. Well, give the women the opportunity to play more sets. I think lots of them would be up for it. It's an interesting topic. I don't think it will happen though.
Yeah, I'm looking at the WTA. I'm not sure they would have to approve it. The players would have to approve it, and I don't see that happening, to be honest, because I just think we see so many injuries in the women's game. If they were playing best of 5 sets, I think it would really, really sort of ramp it up. I saw Patrick Moratoglu, who's a friend of our podcast, kind of commenting that he thinks it should happen because he thinks the equal pay debate will be ended by this. But I don't think anyone thinks the equal pay debate is still on. We all agree that tennis is the leading sport for equality, and to have men's and women's players earning the same money at the slams is a massive breakthrough in our sport, and others could and should follow it down the road. But I don't think best of 5 sets is going to happen for 7 matches in a row. I think there'd be too many injuries. We'd end up getting to the final maybe with 2 players who are not fully fit and ready to play, especially if it might, over a period of time, it might become the norm. But to introduce it in one hit, I think it would be a massive problem. So I don't see it happening. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I think it's interesting because when you look at the men's game, the majority of the year, these guys are playing best of 3 sets. And so for most of these players, when you exclude players like Djokovic, Sinner, and Alcaraz, 95% of their matches are played for 3 sets. And so their bodies aren't conditioned for 5 sets either. And you do see lots of more players getting injured in the slams because of this. And so, even though we say that maybe more women would get injured from playing 5 sets, it's the same in the men's as well. It's an interesting dynamic. I think lots of people that watch tennis don't really realize that most of these players going into a slam, especially if they're new into slams or they've just qualified, they've not played 5-set matches before. It's like a 5K runner entering a marathon all of a sudden. It's a very different sport. What do you think, Greg?
My view is interesting. Having had this discussion, I'm thinking in the old days when I was playing the Master Series, you'd play 2 out of 3 sets until you got to the finals. Then it'd be a 3 out of 5 set final. So when I played Sampras and won in 98, it was 3 out of 5 sets. Imagine that at all the majors. Instead of having it from the quarters onwards, why don't we make the finals 3 out of 5 sets? Imagine what that would have changed last year when Anisimova played Swiatek in the finals. She would have been much more relaxed because having lost the opening set 6-love, she was I got another 2 sets to go at least. It'll settle her down, and maybe she would have played better. Fortunately for her, she played a lot better in that U.S. Open final the week afterwards. But I don't think you're going to have that love and love occasion, which we had at Wimbledon last year. And I think that would be a good solution because, finals tickets are so popular for the men's and the women's of the majors. And I think why not make the final 3 out of 5 set? That would be my solution. So if it happens, I want credit for that one. So that's what I think should happen. But we have to get on now to our next topic, which is Sabalenka. She has been by far the best player on the planet the last 5 majors, but has only won 1, and she's been in 4 finals. So she technically could have won 3 more slams, but every time she's getting a little bit tight when push comes to shove. And again, she had the advantage in the final set against Raducanu being up 3-love. So, what's your view on that, Kevin? What does Sabalenka need to get over that hurdle to close the deal? Because every tournament, you look at last year in Paris, she was by far the best player in the tournament and lost in the finals to Coco in terrible conditions. Then again here, she was by far the best player down under in Australia, and then she didn't close the deal.
My view is, Greg, she's beaten herself. And I think Sabalenka has said that in press conferences. She almost feels like she puts too much pressure on herself. She almost makes it more about how she can control herself. And if she does everything right, she's going to win. Now, Elena Rybakina is the one player I think that might not be the case. Rybakina can take the racket out of her hand and can beat her when she's at her best. And Swiatek, when she's firing as well, is a real handful. But for me, Sabalenka is the best player in the world. She's world number 1 by a pretty wide margin, and she's allowing this sort of desperation and almost this nervousness that she feels when she gets so close to the winning line. She should have won that women's final. It was a great match, and I'm delighted it was, because the women's tournament in Australia didn't throw up too many great matches, but the final was fantastic. So I think she's beaten herself, and she needs to find a way of getting over that massive tension that builds up inside her. You can see after 2 points she's frustrated and she's yelling at her box and she's screaming and she's getting very annoyed about it, or she somehow has to try and find a way to deal with that, because it's going to be very difficult for her now. The scar tissue is building up mentally that she's lost when she was ahead in that 3rd set against Raducanu. She's thinking, oh no, am I going to get over the line, rather than thinking I'm going to win again, which is what Carlos Alcaraz was thinking the following day. Yeah, there's definitely issues there mentally that she needs to try and overcome, those barriers that she's almost put in front of herself. And I don't know what your thoughts are, Ashley. If you were the coach, what would you say to her?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's all mental. She plays the tennis that she needs to win these events until the final, and it does change a little bit. And I guess you can look at it in 2 ways. When you put yourself in so many finals in these situations, it can go one way or another. One way, it can be, right, the odds are in your favor, you're playing 10 finals, you're going to win a few of them, right? Or it can go the other way, and it can create this cloud over your head, and it almost creates an issue in itself that I'm playing so many finals, I'm losing so many finals, is this ever going to end? And so I really think she needs to just put things into perspective slightly. And when it comes to playing good tennis, you look at Sinner and Alcaraz, and we can compare it to the men's game. What they do well when it gets to the big moments, when we say big moments, the juice points, the tie breaks, they play fearlessly. And that was the difference when we looked at them versus Zverev. Zverev played unbelievable tennis until it got to the big points, and he played slightly cagier. And that's the difference. And I think when it comes to Sabalenka, she almost needs to give herself that mental cue. Right, this is a big point. I'm going to swing out on this. And I might miss, but at least I've missed with intent. But if you take your foot off the gas, even if it's by a very fine margin, players like Raducanu can take advantage of that. So she's just got to try and find a way to play fearlessly. And yeah, she's going to win a lot of slams. I have no doubt about it.
Well, the other thing as well is she had Max Murray on her team. We saw him cheering for her on the sidelines. And part of me is thinking, does she need a sports psychologist? Swiatek talks about her sports psychologist being so important. I don't know if she's working with somebody that can get into her mind to play with that freedom she does throughout the whole tournament. And expectation and pressure, when you expect to win, bad things happen. You have to play with freedom, be fearless. And at the moment, you've got to have rituals where you can go to slow yourself down, get in the present, and then just execute. And even if you miss, who cares? Fortune favors the brave. And if she's braver and can get over that hump, then she can win multiple slams and get to 10 digits. She's already won multiple slams, but meaning double-digit slams. She's that good. And that comes right up here. And the thing which I'm impressed with, she puts herself in those positions many a time. So you can't actually criticize her because of everything she's accomplished in her game. But our last conversation topic we have to discuss is Emma Raducanu. I think since she won the U.S. Open, she's had a total of 10 coaches, I believe, now on the tour. And being a coach yourself, Ashley, I thought this would be pertinent to throw to you with your thoughts on this.
It's so difficult to speculate. We don't know, what goes on behind the scenes with these coach, player, parent, agent dynamics. We just don't know. But I do think that the inconsistency in her team is creating an inconsistency in her game, and all of the best players that play consistently, that win consistently, have teams around them that have stuck with them. And yes, I know Alcaraz and Juan Carlos Ferrero are split, but the nuts and bolts of his team have been the same for a long time. And so, yeah, without knowing why the splits are happening, I almost think she needs to go back to one of her old existing coaches that she had, when she was growing up as a teen, to create that familiarity. That is where the bulk of her tennis has been played. From 14 to 18, she did great things with her tennis. Let's go back to that home feel environment with your existing coaches and try to find something there, or hire Greg Rusedski. One of the two is going to be her route to success. I think.
Ashley, stop right there. I'm enjoying this podcast. Can we just not lose Greg around the tour with Emma, please? Thanks very much.
But you know what I see there is, she has Jane O'Donoghue, who was obviously working at the LTA and working with her young when she was a youngster, and she keeps part of the team. We saw her last year when she was with Mark Petchey during the grass court season, but obviously he's got a lot of commitments in the commentary box and works for Tennis Channel and for many networks around the world. So he didn't want to commit to being out there full time. I think it's kind of like what happened when she split with Francisco. It sounded like she wasn't clear what she wanted to do on the court. And I don't think she was 100% healthy, possibly, going into the Australian Open, because we saw slices, we saw drop shots being used, and there wasn't always that clarity at the big moment. When she won the U.S. Open, and burst on the scene and won the tournament, she was super aggressive. There wasn't trying to add that variety into her game, but there was clarity at the big moment. She was going to play aggressive. She was going to go after it. And I think she's got to get back to where she was with that sort of mentality and approach to her game. This is where, when you're coaching someone, it's a really tricky balance, because you've got to add layers to their game, but the player has to be confident to add those layers in practice sets and then bring it into a match. But when push comes to shove, your natural character has to come in. So when I watched her play Potapova, I was looking at some of the shot selection, thinking to myself, is that the right shot, that short slice or drop shot at these moments at times? And it's those decision-making at the big moments that can make it. And for me, I mean, I still think she has a lot of potential. I agree with it, trying to get the consistency, but maybe she hasn't found that right relationship yet. And I hope she does one day. So that's my view on it. What's your view on it, Kevin?
Do you know, I think you said it in one of our previous podcasts, we all put too much pressure on Emma. We all want Emma to do well. There's a sort of negativity out there with certain people on social media almost kind of revel in her setbacks, which I've never understood. She's a magnificent person for British tennis. My daughter absolutely adores her and wants to be like her, and the inspiration she provided at the 2021 US Open when she won that title is still lingering on. Young girls picked up rackets in Britain and around the world because of the inspiration of that incredible story. So let's not put too much pressure on Emma. She's up to top 30 in the world. That's still a great achievement. We all hope and think she can get it back into the top 10. Whether she can beat Sabalenka and all these great champions, I don't know. And she probably doesn't know herself, but you can still have a great career and be in the top 10. And that's not the end of the world, you know. So let's say that she's a great sports person. We really want her to do well. And we hope that she finds the right coach. I do think she needs to stick with someone for a little bit longer than she has done. And the one person she does seem pretty comfortable with is Mark Petchey. So I don't know whether there's anything she can do to get Mark back involved. He's the one guy who seems to be able to have a pretty instant impact. He brings a smile to her face, and you can see that. I think Mark's daughter is even quite friendly with her these days. So I think there's definitely a good bond in that little world when she was in with Mark Petchey. And I think the key to making Emma Raducanu enjoy tennis is that she's enjoying it and that she's smiling and that when she's happy, she seems to be playing her best. And we sometimes see her practicing and sometimes see her on court looking pained. And I just don't think she needs to be out there in that world. She needs to be happy. And I think, Greg, if she does find the right person, or even if she doesn't find the right person, if she's happy even working on her own maybe and having Petchey drop in occasionally and having Jane O'Donoghue around, maybe she doesn't need a full-time coach. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think you just need somebody to give the stability and the belief around her. And we talked about Carlos Alcaraz, and we were worried about the split there with Juan Carlos Ferrero. He seems happy on court. He's expressing himself. He's enjoying it. And look what he did down under. So if you're enjoying it and have that appreciation, Darren Cahill talks about that a lot with his players, about enjoy this moment. It goes so quickly. Enjoy your tennis, enjoy your practice section. How lucky are you to do this for a living? But if you're putting pressure and expectation and all these things on yourself all the time, where's the enjoyment? Come on, you're doing something unbelievable for a living. I'm still super positive on Emma. I still believe there's a lot there, but let's do it step by step. You know, she's done the hardest thing first, winning the US Open. And all the pressure and expectation went on her. You know, let's try to win a WTA Tour title at the lowest level and build up from there. You know, it's a game of building and getting the joy back for a game. So I'm still super positive about Emma. I still think she has a very bright future ahead of her. If she can be 100% healthy and get the right sort of love back to the game, there's no reason why there can't be great results there. So I'm on the positive side for Emma. And I think that's everything we're going to talk about on this episode right now of Off Court with myself, Greg Rusedski, Kevin Palmer, and Ashley Neaves. Thank you for all those people who've subscribed to all our platforms, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on Apple, whether it's on Spotify. Please review us. Give us a like. You know, it helps us grow this platform and podcast. And please leave your thoughts on any platform you're listening to us on. Thank you so much.